Donald Trump told a news story recently about how he parted ways with Jeffrey Epstein. For the first time, Trump acknowledged something that he had previously been loath to admit. The late Virginia Roberts, well, later known as Virginia Giuffre, had worked for him at Mar-a-Lago. Now, you all know who I'm talking about. Virginia was by far the most famous of all the Epstein victims. On the right and on the left, Virginia's testimony is considered to be of extreme importance. Trump's statement is clearly a lie. Virginia's brief employment at Mar-a-Lago occurred in the year 2000. Epstein and Trump were demonstrably friends until they had a falling out in the year 2004. Virginia Roberts was born on August 9, 1983. She began to work at Mar-a-Lago, where her dad also worked, in April of 2000, when she was 16. The spa was closed that year until October, so she was 17 when she became a towel girl. That's when Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's partner, recruited Virginia. By the way, that is the correct pronunciation, Ghislaine. I used to know a Ghislaine in college. I called her Ghislaine for quite a long time until she corrected me. Virginia first met Ghislaine in November 2000. The age of consent in Florida is 18. Now, undeniably then, a crime was committed against Virginia Roberts. Let there be no misunderstanding about where I stand on that point. Both Ghislaine and Jeffrey Epstein should have been charged at that time. It should also be noted that until now, Trump never complained about what Ghislaine Maxwell or Jeffrey Epstein did on his property in the year 2000. Note that Trump carefully avoided admitting to any awareness of Epstein's sexual designs on Virginia. But how could he not know? Trump was the one who famously said that Jeffrey, quote, likes him young. Now, does Trump really want us to believe that as far as he knew, Jeffrey simply wanted Virginia to come over and do a little light dusting? All of that said, I'm about to make an important point which will infuriate many of you. Virginia Roberts Giuffre was a liar. She did not lie about everything, but she did lie about important things. Now, before you call for my decapitation, please hear my evidence. I promise I will prove my point beyond refutation. And when I'm done, you will admit that I am right. Now, you may rationalize, you may minimize the importance of what I am saying, but you will not be able to mount a counter-argument based on evidence. Before I offer my argument, you have to understand why I came to care passionately about the Epstein case. This was back in 2015 when far fewer people were talking about it. The truth is, I absolutely cannot stand Alan Dershowitz. I often wrote blog posts talking about him, how much I disagreed with him. I liked him at one time. He used to be known as a staunch advocate of civil liberties. And he wrote a book called America on Trial. It's a good book. I recommend it. But somewhere along the line, he turned into someone unrecognizable, and in my opinion, unconscionable. I despise that man's incessant defenses of Israel's horrific genocidal policies toward the Palestinians. I despise his stance on torture. I despised that op-ed he wrote, I think it was in 1999 or something like that, in defense of Photoshop-generated child porn. I despised the argument he has made in favor of lowering the age of consent. I despised his involvement in the Baruch Leibovitz case. I despised the unfair sweetheart deal that he generated on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein. I despised his defense of Ghislaine Maxwell. I despised his arguments in favor of expanded presidential powers. I despise his defenses of Donald Trump. I despised his ridiculous attack on Robert Mueller's investigation. And I despised his suggestion that Trump couldn't get a fair trial in D.C. because of the city's, quote, racial composition, unquote. And yes, Dershowitz used those exact words. So I hope I have made myself clear. I am not a fan of Alan Dershowitz. And thus, when Virginia Roberts, as she was then called, came forward in 2015 with sexual allegations against Alan Dershowitz, frankly, I was more than a little bit inclined to take her at her word. I wrote a number of blog posts about the accusations. I never explicitly said he did it because I did not know for a fact that he did do it. I wasn't there. And obviously I'm quite aware that Alan Dershowitz is a good lawyer. One should be cautious about such matters. But the truth is, I wanted to believe Virginia. I really, really wanted her to be proven right in a court of law. And so, like most people, I forgot an important rule. When a witness tells you something that you want to believe, that's when you should be more skeptical, not less skeptical. Virginia later withdrew her claim against Alan Dershowitz. She pretended that her memory was uncertain, as if a memory lapse could explain the very large and important accusation that she had made. I really hate to admit that Dershowitz was right, but truth is determined by evidence, not by likability, not by ideology, by evidence. An innocent man is still innocent, even if you don't like anything that he says or stands for. At some point after she left Epstein and before 2015, Virginia wrote a book. It was called The Billionaire's Playboy Club. Now, this book is about her time with Jeffrey Epstein. The book was never published, for reasons I don't quite understand, but the manuscript was entered into evidence during the legal tussle between Virginia and Ghislaine Maxwell. And that evidence is now available online if you know where to look. At least I found it online some years ago. In that book, she says nothing about having sex with Alan Dershowitz. And yet she goes on and on and on about dalliance she supposedly had with some other much less famous Harvard professor. Alan Dershowitz does show up in the book, but he doesn't really do anything wrong. So when Virginia backed down from her claim against Alan Dershowitz, no one can claim that she buckled under pressure. Her own book undermined her claim. So my disappointment with Virginia was profound. I guess it's part of my personality. I have always had a weakness for the image of female heroism. I was ready to place Virginia Roberts on a pedestal alongside Harriet Tubman or Edith Cavell or Jeanne d'Arc, or if her claim against Dershowitz had been proven in court, I was ready to form a whole new religion around that woman. When she was proven false, it hit me really hard. And if you don't think that she was speaking falsely, ask yourself, why wasn't Virginia Roberts called to testify at the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell? The obvious answer? She had shredded her credibility. She would have been destroyed on the witness stand. Yes, I know that she died tragically, but in a situation like this, we cannot simply say nil nisi bonum and leave it at that. People are still talking about Virginia. People still believe all of her claims without subjecting her to any real special scrutiny. You see, the Dershowitz accusation? That is not her biggest and most obvious lie. What I'm about to disclose is something that neither the right-wing media nor the left-wing media wants to talk about. Virginia Roberts lied about her age in a case involving underaged sex. She lied to the tune of 2 whole years. She lied under oath. She lied when she was questioned by the FBI. She lied to her own lawyer, Bradley Edwards, who stopped defending her. Ask Mr. Edwards why he did that. She lied to her great journalistic defender, Julie K. Brown. She also lied to journalist Sharon Churcher. In fact, she lied to everyone. For a long, long time, Virginia claimed that she was 15 when she was recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell. She claimed that Epstein then groomed her for a 2-year period before lending her out to anyone else. She also told a very elaborate story about a Sweet 16 party that Epstein threw for her, culminating in a birthday rape. This was a horror story that was very, very detailed, and none of this was true. She did not meet Epstein until she was 17. She admits it in this interview. Yet here she is at an earlier stage of her career telling her lawyer that she was 15. You can see it right here in print. Now, this is no small matter. It cannot be rationalized. It should not be minimized. I'm sorry, but when it comes to accusations of statutory rape, we can fairly demand of the accuser that she at least get her age right. If there's one thing in the world that we can ask the accuser to be correct and specific about, it's her age. That's not too much to ask for. Now, God knows, I am not trying to excuse Epstein's behavior. Quite the contrary. I consider the Epstein case to be of extreme importance. I have long suspected that this case has ramifications which go beyond even the wildest conspiracy theories, especially when you start asking the question, where did Epstein get his money? And why did Acosta say that Jeffrey Epstein belonged to intelligence? This is a big, big matter, and in a big and important case, we need the key witnesses to be credible. We need them to be honest. We simply cannot excuse deliberate lying. Julie Brown has tried to rationalize Virginia's lies. Julie has said that traumatized victims sometimes have memory problems. Sorry, Julie. No sale. See, I heard that excuse a lot back in the 1990s. I tried to write a book about satanic ritual abuse, that whole controversy. And, no, I didn't buy it then, and I'm not buying it now. 2 whole years. Virginia lied about her age to the tune of 2 whole years. That is not a mere memory lapse. That whole elaborate Sweet 16 story? You can't just say that was a simple oopsie. I think we can all guess what really happened. Virginia wanted to sell a book, maybe cut a movie deal. So she salted her story in order to make it a little more shocking, a little more sensational. The thing is, if she had kept to the strict truth, she still would have had a damn good book. She still would have incriminated Jeffrey Epstein. But truth wasn't enough for her. How, I ask you, does she differ from Donald Trump? Now, you remember when Trump told that really weird story about the time his Uncle John supposedly met the Unabomber, and we later found out that whole thing was complete fiction? What's weird about it is if you look at the video footage of Trump delivering that story, he really seems to believe in his own fantasy. He's not the only one. Increasingly, we live in a world of competing hallucinations. The public prefers myth to truth. We accept only those facts which favor our biases, left or right, Democrat or Republican. Nobody cares about proof or evidence anymore. Americans are just in the market for myth. Now, does that mean that I think Virginia lied about everything? Of course not. Personally, I believe a lot of what she said. And that brings me to a final point. If you're like me, if you're interested in historical mysteries, in great controversies, in enigmas, in scandals that people have been arguing about for generations, you'll have to admit that far too often, the little theories that we latch on to, they rely on witness accounts, and those witnesses often turn out to be truth tellers on some points, and maybe not so truthful on others. There seems to be a kind of cosmic law which dictates that no matter what kind of rabbit hole we delve into, there's always a Virginia in there somewhere. For example, I have long been interested in the problem of naming the person who forged the infamous hoax known as the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Now, in 1921, we got a key piece of testimony. It was provided by a Russian expatriate called Princess Catherine Radziwill. She claimed to have been literally in the room when it happened. Unfortunately, on other occasions, Princess Radziwill demonstrated that she had a tendency to stretch the truth. Now, personally, I'm inclined to accept much of what she said about the protocols, but I would have a hard time defending that proposition in a scholarly fashion because, well, she had an inconsistent attitude towards basic honesty. Now, we can get into the details of that business at another time if you wish, but this is not the place for that argument. Here's another example. Many of you know about the famous claim that a UFO crash-landed not far from Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. The key witness in that case was an Army Air Force major named Jesse Marcel. The problem? Jesse Marcel provably told a couple of whoppers about matters unrelated to the crash. Now, does that mean he lied about the crash? Not necessarily, but let's face it. The fact that this man had a tendency to tell stretchers, it definitely doesn't help us. Here's another example, and it relates to the Epstein case. Take a look at Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell. British journalist Gordon Thomas wrote a biography of Maxwell which identified him as a spy for Israel, and for other countries, but particularly Israel. Now, I encourage everyone to read Thomas's book. It provides a lot of important puzzle pieces, a lot to chew on. But one of Thomas's sources was an infamous Israeli spook by the name of Ari ben Menashe. I believe he's still alive. This is not the time or the place to tell that man's wild life story, but suffice it to say that he is a wild and crazy guy. And he has been credibly accused of telling more than one version of the same event. Now, does that mean that he lied about Robert Maxwell? No, not necessarily. Nevertheless, Ari ben Menashe is a difficult source of information, and we desperately need reliable data about Robert Maxwell. And so we return to my basic point. No matter what controversy you look into, there is always a Virginia. There is always that one infuriating witness who forces us to make ridiculously strained arguments. Yes, she told a lie over here, but I think she's telling a truth about this matter over there. I hate having to deal with these witnesses. If you like to explore rabbit holes and historical mysteries, you could probably name a few examples on your own. Yet here we are, again. We can't solve the Virginia problem by ignoring it. We can't make the Virginia problem go away by launching ad hominem attacks on people who tell you something you don't want to hear. Now, you can assail me all you want to, but I believe that I have proven my point with courtroom-quality evidence. Yes, Virginia Roberts Giuffre really was a victim. She was also a liar. It is possible for the same person to be both things. Back in college, more years ago than I care to reveal, I had a professor, and he was troubled one day because he could not get his head around the fact that a friend of his routinely cheated at cards. You see, this friend was a Holocaust victim. My professor had fallen prey to a common mistake that we all make. We all think that victims should be saints. They're not saints. They're people. And people are often disappointing. We can't divide the world up into white hats and black hats. That's not the way the world is. We live in a frustrating, maddening world, filled with personalities who are complicated and conflicted, and every so often they're just plain crazy. And that's why on a later occasion, I hope to address what Virginia had to say about Al Gore and Bill Clinton, because those stories were also lies. Until then, my name is Martin Joseph Cannon. I don't know if this video will be part of an ongoing series, but I will see you again.